Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending April 28th. We've got a big show tonight as William Bernanke from CG Analytics is going to join us. He's going to talk NFL draft, NBA playoffs, and the hockey situation, how the books have fared in all of those sports. A couple monumental Game 7s last night we'll recap. Also, we've got Handicapper's Corner. Ralph Michaels is going to share his selections for NFL draft props. And then, of course, Ralph and I are going to break down the NBA playoffs for you. And we'll have best bets at the end of the show. Want to give everybody a 25% off offer here listening to the podcast tonight. If you want to buy a package from either Ralph Michaels or myself, you can get 25% off when you use coupon code POD25. That's POD25. All right, let's bring in tonight's first guest. He's William Bernanke, manager at CG Analytics. You can follow Will on Twitter at the Moneyline Guy. Will, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, always a pleasure, Marco. How you doing?
Doing good, Will. We're just cranking out NBA playoffs, a lot of blowouts. We'll get to that in a second. But the big news is tomorrow night. We're taping a night early. Normally we do the podcast on Thursday night, but we really couldn't talk about the NFL draft tomorrow night. We want to make everybody some money, so we're going to talk about it tonight and look forward to the draft. I know you guys have put up a lot of draft props. How has the betting been for the props this year? I know this is something new to Vegas just the last few years that we've been able to bet on the NFL draft. How's the action been? It's
been okay. Not a lot of electrifying names, of course, to stimulate the casual bettors. So, therefore, the handle isn't what we'd like. And also, the window is pretty small to bet these props. It's only, a couple days. And a lot of bettors, we have to notify them that we're closing down shop at 11 p.m. Tonight. So, you got to get your bets in before you hit the sack.
With something like betting the draft, do you find that the majority of the action is more from the sharper accounts, or is the public getting involved in making some wagers on the draft props?
It's a mixed bag, Marco. The sharps certainly look for an off number and try to jump on it right away. And the casual bettors, they do what they do with games. They just kind of go off what they think will happen, not necessarily any type of formula. And interestingly enough, speaking of casual bettors, there's been no bets thus far on Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins to be the number one pick, which is kind of surprising. Certainly Kyler Murray, that no one's taken a stab at that. I'm kind of shocked.
Yeah, but not much of odds-wise there with Kyler Murray if you're going to go that route, because everybody pretty much slam dunk for Kyler Murray to be the number one pick. Are there any props, though, that you have some liability and is that, if there is, considered from a sharp account?
Yeah, so far, I'm going to run down a list here. Biggest liability right now is under 1.5 running backs drafted in the first round. So that right now is not by much, but it's our biggest liability. Dwayne Haskins, over 6.5, being selected, 7th round or more. It's kind of confusing, the wording. Now he's actually up to 10.5, and that's been some sharp action on that. Montez Sweat, over 8.5 draft position. And a sharp action on 8.5. We just moved the juice there. And Ed Oliver under 7.5. That's another one we're seeing some decent liability on. The sharp play on the under. And total Bama players also drafted in the first round over 2.5 is a sharp play.
Okay, good stuff there. We'll appreciate you sharing that. Let's shift gears. NBA playoffs. When the favorites are steamrolling the way that they have been in the first round, and it has been a steamroller, I got to imagine that's not the best of results for the house.
No, not the best results, but certainly not as bad as one may think when you look at it from afar. We'll always get some dog money. We're moving the numbers to the point where we'll attract some underdog money at those bigger prices, bigger spreads, especially like teams like the Pistons and the Magic, and even the Clippers tonight. So we're not in so much a huge hole with those scenarios, happening.
Which series was the best and which one was the worst for the house in round one?
Well, best result happened last night when Damian Lillard hit that incredible three-pointer to beat OKC. Portland winning that series. They went off, I believe, as a $1.50 underdog That was our best result, series price. And the worst was the Celtics beating Indiana and even sweeping. We took a couple of sweep bets on that. I don't have the odds in front of me, but that one wasn't very good, kind of hurt us.
Yeah, the Oklahoma City, when we had you on last week, and we were talking about when the series price is open, that was the one that stuck out to me. I couldn't understand, everybody not giving any respect to Portland. They've been there all year. Oklahoma City wasn't that good down the stretch, and they showed it in the playoffs. They just, my God, Russell Westbrook couldn't shoot the ball in the ocean, but they're done, so we don't have to worry about them. And I'm sure last night, as you said, that three-pointer, the other thing that had to help as well was Portland won but didn't cover last night. I don't know where your action was exactly on the game, but that's something that we haven't seen a lot of in the playoffs so far. It's just been pick the winner, whether it's been an underdog that wins outright or a favorite winning and covering. I think there's only been 3 or 4 where the point spread has actually come into play so far in the playoffs. Looking ahead to round 2, we have Boston and Milwaukee already decided, and Philadelphia and Toronto. Those matchups are set. What are the current series prices on those, and have you taken any significant bets on either series or in the game ones?
Right now, the current price of Milwaukee's $280, and Toronto is at $230. And right now, so far, it's been just good two-way action. Nothing crazy, no big bets yet, so it looks like we got the numbers right. Milwaukee, interesting, we got $280, and this was one where it was very tough to price this because if you look at game one spread, Milwaukee's minus, I believe they're -8 in that range, 7.5, 8. And if you look at the Houston-Utah series, when that series opened, Houston was a 6.5-point favorite in game one. If you look at both series, Houston was priced in that series opener, I believe, over $400. So we're looking at this one dropping the price because we anticipate Celtic money to come in.
And, Will, that's something that we've seen all year long. I mean, even when Boston was, definitely hanging around the 4th and 5th seed midway through the season, they still were getting action in the futures market. Everybody just kept waiting for this Boston team, to shift gears or whatever, and they didn't do it. I mean, they're in the playoffs, and still people believe that this is a team to beat if they can get have everybody healthy on the floor at one time, something that the Celtics have had not very often going back to the start of last season with what happened with Hayward and everything. But as far as coaches in the East, Brad Stevens, he's the Popovich of the Eastern Conference, and so he can work his magic. And in that first round, as you said, they swept Indiana. I think that was one of the lowest total margin of victory in a 4-game sweep with Boston over Indiana. So they did just enough to get it done, but they did get it done, and they move on. The Toronto one, I want to ask you a question. I was surprised. I thought you might tell me that we were getting some Philadelphia money in game one because everybody knows the history of Toronto in those game ones in a series. They are a pathetic, I think, 2-14 straight up. And, of course, being a favorite here, 2-14, you might see some money from guys that will see that stat because that stat's going to float around the next couple days.
Yeah, that's true. I think kind of bettors are a little bit changing their tune with Toronto, considering that there's such a big makeover with the personnel and the coaching staff. So I think people are just going to look at it independently. This is a whole different team. Like it's a different organization altogether, and handicap it accordingly. And, the fact that both teams really had similar scenarios last series. They both lost game ones and ended up winning the next 4. So they really come in kind of mirroring each other in that regard.
Absolutely. Changing gears, Will, what an epic night last night. 2 Game 7s. The Vegas Golden Knights, San Jose is going to be one for the ages. People are going to be talking about that one for a long time. How, I got to imagine, being that this is Golden Knights country and the way the fan base has embraced the Vegas Golden Knights, how did that fare for you guys? The Golden Knights losing last night, losing the series, losing Game 7. What was the result for the house?
Well, last night was a very good result for us. We had a mid-five-figure win on Game 7 alone. Series price was just a small win with the Sharks because we did have some sharp action on San Jose to offset any public money that came in on Vegas. But it was a good result. And it's going forward, it's not going to affect the handle, in my opinion, because there's so many good markets still left, including my Islanders are in there. You got great stories with Columbus still alive, winning their series, sweeping Tampa Bay. Boston's a big market, big name public team. They're playing Columbus next round. Dallas, St. Louis is an intriguing series. And Colorado Avalanche, a lot of people like this team. Let's keep an eye on them playing San Jose. They're in a very exciting team. They play almost like an old-style, fast 80s type of style. I'm sure you remember those teams back in the 80s. Colorado kind of reminds us of that.
Yeah, and, your team, the Islanders, that was very nice of you not to mention who they beat to move on. Go ahead. You can have your props. Who did they beat?
I forgot that Mario Lemieux's team.
Yeah, yeah. My Penguins. That's my old hometown. It's been a rough week for hockey for me. I lost my old hometown and my new hometown, in a matter of a week. Not good. Will, looking ahead to round 2, have you seen any action, any significant money come in on any of the series that you would say is noteworthy?
Well, right now, let me go to the current prices. Nothing right now. We're sitting at the same prices we opened for every series, so it looks like bettors are taking a wait-and-see approach. Boston, we're at $1.60. St. Louis, $1.60, $1.40. San Jose. It looks like people are just kind of waiting for Game 1. I think go game by game because we're not seeing any series prices. These numbers are a little tighter than series the first round. So if anything, I do expect to see bettors come in on some dogs because of all the upsets.
Yeah, I got to expect some money on Colorado in the first game at least. People are going to look at these teams that went to Game 7s, and especially San Jose. I mean, the San Jose-Vegas Golden Knights series, because they played last year and now they played again this year, that's become an instant rivalry between those two teams. And let's face it, it was a physical series. A lot of checking, a lot of hitting, a lot of fights. You got to think that Game 7, and remember, they also had a Game 6 that was double overtime. You got to wonder if the gas tank's going to be a little bit on empty that first game against Colorado. Granted, it is a Game 1, and you're going to be pumped up having Colorado in your building, but I don't know. I got to think Colorado might be a live dog.
Yeah, and the only one thing is going for San Jose is they do play on Friday, and they'll have 2 days off, so it's not so bad, and they're home, so they don't have any travel. But, yeah, adrenaline will only take you so far, maybe a period, maybe even 2, and you might see Colorado, who's been in fact, the way they handled Calgary, it was almost like they wore them down with their speed and their depth, and that could be the case here.
All right, Will, great stuff as always. Will, what's happening at CG this week? Anything you want to tell us about?
Yeah, well, we were just working on them today. NFL weeks 2 through 16 are going up very soon. So we got through week 8 today. So those will be up and bettable very soon, and we're excited about it. Those are fun times that we have over there, making up those numbers and coming to a consensus. But of course, the NBA and NHL playoffs, heating up. MLB's in full swing. And I always want to mention in-running's available for all our playoff games, NHL, NBA. So you make sure you get the CG app, sign up for an account and download the app in any one of our books, Palms, Cosmo, Venetian, Palazzo, Tropicana, Silverton, the M, or the Hard Rock, because you need the app to bet like a pro.
That's the way to do it. And don't forget, guys, we got a lot of people that listen to the podcast from outside of Nevada. If you're visiting Nevada, you can use the app. You don't have to live here. You just have to be in the state. You can come in if you're here for 3 days. Instead of standing in line to make your wagers, just go in, open up an account. Takes about as much time as it does to get in line and make a bet or two. You have the app, put the money in the app. You can bet all weekend, however long you're here. And then right before you're ready to leave, just go up to the window. It'd be the same as cashing a ticket. Get your money out, and you're on your way. That's the easiest way to do it, Will, especially now. The weather's changing. People want to hang out at the pool. They want to go party at the nightclubs. you can do your betting wherever you're at, and highly recommend using the CG app. Will, hope we'll be able to talk to you next week, and thanks for changing your schedule around for us, both day and time today, to get this segment in with us. We appreciate it as always, and we will be back after a quick break here. We're going to step out. When we return, it is Handicapper's Corner.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're going to head to Handicapper's Corner, and this week it is NFL Draft Talk. The draft is tomorrow. We're taping on Wednesday night. Ralph, we're going to go through some of the props here. We just had Will on from CG Technologies, and we're going to go with some of the props that they have up over there. I'm going to ask you what you think of them, and tell me if you see any value or not, or just move on to the next one. Backstory for you, obviously, you are a person that knows the draft well. You're a guy that all those years at Phil Steele doing North Coast, you were one of the editors on the magazine, so you were in depth and looking at all this talent that was coming through these schools and now making the step to the NFL. The first prop, and it's always one of the most popular props because the quarterbacks get all of the limelight, you've got number of quarterbacks drafted in the first round, and it's sitting at 3.5. Everybody, pretty much, it's a slam dunk that 3 of the 4 names that we've been talking about are going to go in that first round. The question is, does that 4th one get his name read in the first round?
Yeah, I actually have Daniel Jones of Duke going number 15 to Washington, so I think they are. But for me, you don't know if any quarterback's going to slide. And with the over minus 340, it's not one that I'm going to bet on having to lay 340 odds over the 3.5.
All right, moving over to the next one, running backs in the first round. Ralph, over the years, the running back position in the draft has diminished, and paying a running back big money has gone by the wayside, but we've had a little bit of a changing of the guard because of the success. Ezekiel Elliott, when he came out, again, put the power
Shaquan
running.
Barkley owns Ezekiel Elliott a lot of money.
Absolutely. And Todd Gurley, too. Todd Gurley is become a feature back every day, with the Rams with their success. Even to an extent, Le'Veon Bell with Pittsburgh's, when he was there and healthy on the field, clearly was one of the most important players in the NFL. Does that trend continue, or are we going to see more running backs going early again, or is it going to go back to the way it was a few years ago?
Boy, this is one of the weakest running back classes I ever remember. I mean, I would think that I asked 9 people on the street, and out of those 9, none would get any running backs in the first round. The number's 1.5. The number's 1.5, and the under is minus 600. Why? The only running back going to go in the first round is Josh Jacobs of Alabama. And even if he slid out and had nobody, it would surprise me. But again, even though it's as close to a sure thing as you can get, I'm not one that's going to suggest to someone to lay minus 600 for that play.
All right, and wide receivers. Now, we've seen wide receivers be more of impact players recently. Do you go over the 2.5 at minus 160, or do you see it under 2.5 on the wide receiver position?
Well, there's 2 wide receivers for sure. And now you come into the question, and I have A.J. Brown from Ole Miss going number 32 to New England. So that's about as close as you're going to get. Now, New England needs a wide receiver. The problem with New England, though, is we know that they're very apt to if anyone's going to give them any value to trade down, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots are going to trade out of that pick, get more draft choices, and move down. So, again, there's some plays coming up here, but because of New England being that 32nd pick, and even though I think it's going over, I wouldn't bet it because of that. Because if they move out and someone else likes someone for that last pick in the first round, there could be some it could only be 2 being picked.
Moving to the next one, this has been a favorite because Alabama's been such a dominant force in college football for how long. How many of their players get drafted in the first round? A little bit of a lower number this year, 2.5, and the over is minus 200. Do you see 3 players on this?
Over. Even with the minus 200, I like this over. I have 4 players going. I have 4 players going in the top 25. Even though you're laying 200 in this bet, I like Alabama to go over. You're going to have Quinn Adams going probably number 3 to the Jets. You're going to have Jonah Williams going to Carolina, I project them. And then Irv Smith Jr. and Josh Jacobs in the first round. Again, I think this is a slam dunk.
All right, looking at more players drafted in the first round, offensive or defensive, and you can't just pick here and lay a money line. They're making you lay a number here, and if you want to take the defensive players, which that's been the tendency for the big impact player on defense, you got to lay 3.5 players here. How do you see this one? And you're laying, not only are you minus 3.5 players, you're laying 140, laying that 3.5.
Well, I like the offense, and the interesting thing is this. I mean, even though you're going to read these 3 props in order, they don't make sense because right now the defensive player minus 3.5 is minus 140. The next 2 props you're going to read, which are associated, offensive players 15.5. Even, almost even money. Defensive players 16.5. So they're allowing you to bet only one difference between the offense and the defense, yet you can get plus 3.5 players on the offense here. This is just a mistake on their part. Plus 3.5 offensive players. I have 16 drafted on both offense and defense. Plus 3.5, and you're getting plus money. The best bet.
All right, there you have the best bet for Ralph. That will be your best bet for this segment. We'll give a bonus
Absolutely,
best bet.
Yep.
And let's go to a couple other props. You talked about a couple different props. Total offensive players drafted, 15.5.
Defense, 16.5. Yeah. And I'm at 16, so I wouldn't bet either because I'm within a half of one. Any player trades out, and all of a sudden it throws off your thing. So with only a half of one, even though I'm value, but again,
going to the 3.5.
The one absolutely makes no sense when you're reading the next 2 after it. Something that baffles me.
All right, let's talk about this. To me, I think is the player that's going to make how things play out. Because if he doesn't go early, then it's going to change probably some minds of some people down the road of who they were going to take if he's still available. And that player is Dwayne Haskins, Ohio State quarterback. The prop bet is, will he go over or under 6.5 person taken in the draft? Ralph, I'm going to ask you this. Ohio State's not had a lot of success with quarterbacks coming out and going to the NFL. Does Dwayne Haskins, is he the player that can do that?
Oh, he's different than any quarterback they've had. They've had college quarterbacks that just had success. You know, Haskins is an NFL quarterback. I have no concerns with that. The number's 6.5 because the Giants sit at number 6, and everyone thinks Eli Manning needs a replacement. But, you know, no one's known what the Giants have done, and now also the Giants were also talking about Daniel Jones. Even though the over is minus 200, this is another one where I think there's value to the over, even laying the 2-to-1 odds in this situation. So I have Haskins actually going number 11 to Cincinnati.
Let's throw in another wrinkle to it. You know, there's the possibility of, do the Giants jump in here? But there's also the possibility, and this will change things for Haskins drastically, in my opinion, if Arizona does take Kyler Murray number 1 for their quarterback.
Done deal, yeah.
You can't keep two number 1 picks on that roster. Well, they're going to trade Josh Rosen, and then is he a guy in play for either the Giants or Washington?
Well, on one of the offshore accounts I have, you know, this isn't something you can place in Vegas, but the Giants are a significant favorite to whose roster Josh Rosen will be on September the 1st.
Okay.
And they're almost minus 300 in that bet. And there's a lot of teams listed. But so, again, that carries over to that thought that there must have been some talks or something there for them to be that significant of a favorite for that prop.
And if the Giants pull the trigger there, that I feel changes the draft position for Haskins. How do you feel?
If I'm the Giants, I wait because on draft day, people want more. When it gets to be in the summer, no one else is going to want Josh Rosen. I don't think he's that much of a commodity that people are going to jump out. They thought they stretched for him last year in the draft. He was the person that had the brightest mind, but showed the least potential on the field. So I think the Giants need to play chicken wait as long as they can, and the price will go down significantly.
All right, this next one, unless you're betting a long shot, there's no value here. There's
no bet. Yeah, it's a lot of them even took it off. I don't know if it's still on there, but first pick will be Kyler Murray. And I mean, I tweeted something out this week, Marco. The draft started in 1936. Only once since 1936 has a school had back-to-back players drafted as the number one pick. That was Ron Yeri and O.J. Simpson in 68-69. Now imagine Oklahoma's not only having the number one player, but the same position drafted back-to-back years. That is just absolutely unprecedented.
And we know the success that Baker Mayfield had last year, so that is fueling all the optimism for Kyler Murray, who had no intention of playing football entering this year.
Yeah, he took a $7 million payout from the A's. Yeah, so he had to return it. But, hey, if you're the number one pick in the NFL and that's your goals, there's a lot more money to be made as Baker Mayfield will tell you the sponsorships he got is going to pay for well worth that $7 million he had to pay back for the A's.
Going down some player props quickly, where they're going to go over or under draft position. DK Metcalf. They have him at going 18.5 over or under.
You know, I like the over. The odds are short. I have him going number 26.
All right. Drew Lock. And I know this is a guy that's gotten a lot of talk in the last couple weeks. Quarterback from Missouri. Over under 10.5. Where do you see him at?
Well, I think he's going to go, unless the Giants take him, I think he's going to go 11 or 13. So I would still bet the over.
Greedy
Williams.
Oh, Greedy Williams.
Greedy Williams from LSU. Yeah, I mean, his real name is Andreas, but everyone knows him as Greedy Williams. I think there's value in Greedy Williams. They have him 21.5. You're getting basically pick a money. I have him going 23. So only a spot and a half, but the difference with the spot and a half, Marco, is that the first few teams in that 20, 21, 22 range don't need a DB. So, you know, that's what you have to look for. Even though it's a spot and a half, I like the play because of the needs of the teams right in front of them. So
you don't subscribe to the best player available?
Yeah, you know, though it's gone by the wayside for some teams. You know, The Giants have complained that that's not the case. And, you know, other teams have – you know, some Giants fans were complaining that's not the case, but did they really need the running back? And when they could have had a defensive player, which they had the worst defense.
They've had no running game forever in New York.
You know, the GMs are so different nowadays that if you really have a need, I think you need to draft that spot because it's so hard to find. You know, DBs are hard to find. You don't have cover cornerbacks, and Greedy can't cover, but he's not to the elite level of some of those other LSU guys we've seen the last few years, starting with the Honey Badger. I mean, he started a list of 5, 6, or 7 first-round DBs the last couple of years that have just been phenomenal.
How about Ed Oliver? They got him at 7.5.
You know, I have him actually going 6. So this is one where I would go under. Under's minus $140, and I think Oliver. Actually, I think I have Oliver going to the Giants. So I think the Giants will go defense, and that is my pick that they take Ed Oliver.
Montez Sweat, 8.5.
I have Montez Sweat as the 8th pick. So a little too close to touch. He's a kid that can change a game. He really is a top 10 pick. He will go there. So I would have to bet over on that.
Nick Bosa, 2.5.
Oh, there's no way San Francisco doesn't take him. He's the best player on the board, period. You know, and to have a player that you know is going to be a superstar. And how do you know that? Well, you have the lineage. I mean, every level he's played, he's followed his brother Joey. He's been better than his brother Joey. He's stronger. He's faster. It's a no-brainer. I think San Francisco is absolutely ecstatic that Kyler Murray's the number 1 pick, and they are going to get the best player with the number 2 pick in the draft.
And you'd lay the minus 250.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably gone up quite a bit. I think right now you're probably laying closer to 350 or 400 as opposed to being the number 2 pick.
All right, Ralph, appreciate you sharing your draft knowledge with us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it is NBA playoff previews. We're going to take a look at series that are still remaining from round 1 and take a quick peek at round 2 coming up on the weekend. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're going to take a look at the NBA playoff picture for Thursday night action, and then we're going to skip ahead to the weekend as round 2 will be beginning on some of these series. First, though, I want to tell you that this segment is sponsored by uwager.eu. That's uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus using promo code WT50. That's WT50. Get a 50% sign-up bonus when you make a deposit. All right, Ralph, it is NBA playoff time. We've got a couple still battling it out in the first round. Got the Jazz and Spurs. Jazz up 3-2, and then you've got
Jazz and Rockets.
Jazz and Rockets.
Rockets
3-1 in Spurs and Nuggets 3-2.
So one series. That's all we've had. We've had one series, and that's the one we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
In all of action, I mean, we talked about the disparity of between the 1s and 2s and 3s and the 7s and 8s, but it's shown exactly what we did. I mean, teams got one win and they stole one, and that was it. The other teams came to play and punched them in the teeth.
Yeah, we're making jokes about it. I mean, Twitter was making jokes left and right. I got involved last night when Orlando was down. I think it was like 30-7 in the first quarter. You know, I sent out the tweet. Orlando's playing like a team that has tea time scheduled for Thursday because they weren't playing basketball last night. Only for an hour later, when the Nets took the court against Philadelphia, I tweeted back at myself and said, apparently they have the tea time with the Brooklyn Nets because they didn't show up tonight. It's actually a joke. It's a disgrace, I think, to the NBA and for the product that the fan base is watching. I mean, last night, obviously here in Vegas, the Golden Knights were playing a Game 7. You had 2 Game 7s last night in hockey, and the excitement on the edge of your seat for, both games, more so the Vegas Knights game, not because it was just Vegas, because of what happened in that game. And you couldn't take your eyes off the TV.
Well, I mean, we know there's parity in the NHL, but I mean,
doesn't that make for a better product?
Well, I'm not. I mean, the NFL would agree with you. I mean, that's why they have their salary caps, and that's why the NBA is out of control because, yes, they have the salary cap, but if you pay the luxury tax, you can have anyone you want. And so I completely agree. I mean, if you're going to play this way, you might as well. They have 8 playoff teams, so it's more exciting, more revenue, more teams make it. But if this is going to be the case, I mean, there's really probably only in the East, maybe 5 teams or 6. Have 6.
There's four good teams in the East. 5 if Indiana's healthy.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're
But perhaps the NBA should just do this: make the regular season meaningful by giving the top 2 seeds buys and have two play 6 and 3 play 4 and. Just be done with it. Get rid of 7s and 8s because it's been a joke. They've been struggling to get in, and that way, all of a sudden, maybe players aren't going to rest, and you get some people playing defense in the regular season, giving the top 2 seeds a bye for the first series.
Going with the series that we're still talking about, Denver's at San Antonio on Thursday night. We're looking at a line of 2.5. Checking updated lines on that if that's changed.
2.5 or 3 split, yeah.
Split around town. The situation with this one, the Nuggets, they didn't get any respect. They were the number 2 seed, and they were number 1 for a good part of the season, Ralph. But they came into the playoffs a lot of love for the San Antonio Spurs. And down the final week of the season, people were actually talking about teams jockeying to get into the 7th spot, that's where they wanted. They wanted Denver. And, how can you say
if you want Denver instead of Golden State or Houston, I understand that, but it's not.
I get that because Houston had their injuries early in the year, so they weren't going to get to number 2 spot. But Denver's played well, and I think they played a little with a disrespect card. Look at Game 1, they got beat, okay? San Antonio took it to them. Game 2, San Antonio, this was a game that was close. San Antonio, Game 2, had a big lead, and the Rockets come roaring back. Now, it was a big lead in the second quarter. It wasn't like a collapse like the Warriors had late in the third playing at home, but when they came back and got that win and then went down to San Antonio and stole a game, what do you make of this? The Spurs now, do they, can they bounce back and win this game at home and get back into the series, or is it, are they done? Did Denver figure them out?
I think Denver wins the series, but I think it goes 7. And you look at Denver. Denver got to be the number 2 seed, and like you said, they were the number 1 seed for much of the season because they had the best home court record in the NBA. They had teams coming in that were tired with their altitude. They pressed the pace, and they ran up tempo. They got away from that in the playoffs a little bit. And now a team sees you can't run that same tempo. But to me, the difference is the Spurs point guard, Derek White's a second-year point guard. He struggled in those games at Denver. I think back at home, he plays well enough to get it done. I like San Antonio in this game, and then I think Denver clinches back home in Game 7.
Yeah, you look at this one, and you look at the Denver defense. They have gotten better in the last 3 ball games. They let the Spurs shoot 49%. 3 games back, 2 games back, then they dropped that number to 46%. And in the last game, they held the Spurs to 41% shooting and just 90 points, the lowest point for San Antonio, obviously, in the playoffs. I don't know. When we started, we did the podcast last week, and we started these playoffs and stuff, Ralph, I said to you, I don't understand the number on Denver. I thought they were given too much of an overvalue for Pop. This San Antonio team, yes, they are better than we thought they would be this year, but the teams that San Antonio beat down the stretch before they got into the playoffs, it was not good. They didn't have, winning game. They beat Dallas. They beat Cleveland. They beat Washington. Did any of those teams make the playoffs?
You can't look at the last week of the schedule. You can only play who you beat, who you played. I mean, it's,
that was their winning. That was their winning streak going into the playoffs.
Oh, win or lose, the last couple games of the regular season doesn't mean to me. I mean, again, I'm so used to watching LeBron resting players what they want. It's, I don't look at any game going into the regular season one iota if they're playing poorly. If a team is playing well, I think, yes, playing well can help you, but I don't think playing poorly hurts you at all if you're resting players. If you're playing poorly and all your players are
But they were jockeying trying to get that 7th spot.
Oh, so you say. That's not – again, let's talk about this game. Tell me who you like in Game 1 and not who you beat to get in here.
I like the Nuggets in here. I think they've got San Antonio figured out. I think at this number, Vegas is begging you to take San Antonio. You look at it, when they came here the first game, line was 4.5. Second game line was 4. Now it's only 2.5. 3, I think when the public gets involved, we'll see 3s across the board. But Vegas brought it out at 2.5, Ralph. To me, they were saying, here, go ahead, please. Take San Antonio. Take Pop. You can have them. No, I don't.
All right, and I'll say thank you.
All right, there we go. Well, let's go to Saturday, and we got a couple series starting with the round 2 as these guys finished up rather early, and we'll talk about the series price first. We got Boston and Milwaukee. Boston's the team that's gotten a lot of respect all year, even though they didn't play up to what people thought they were going to be. They were the favorite in many books to win the East. In this series, you've got Milwaukee, the team with the best record in the East, at -300, Boston at +240. Are you buying into the live dog Boston, or do you drinking the Kool-Aid with Milwaukee. They've been the best team all year. Do they continue to be it?
I mean, analytically, Milwaukee's been superstars. I mean, +9+ points per game. The next best was Golden State at +6 points per game. You know, you have a superstar like Antetokounmpo, and they are using him exactly like you should. The offense is going around him. He's making the offense better. The defense is going around him. He's making the defense better. I mean, and to think they're doing this with, you know, a different coaching staff than they've had the past few years. So I love the Bucks team, but you weren't tested round one at all, nor was Boston tested against a Pacers team without Oladipo. But round two, Boston's been there and done that. Remember, this Celtics team has gone to the Eastern Conference Finals the last 2 years. Last year without Kyrie and Hayward. Well, Kyrie and Hayward are back. Yes, they are without Smart for a while, and that is a big loss, couple weeks, and we'll see if he can even come back. You know, as far as a series price, you know, I don't think Milwaukee should be a 3-1 favorite. But I also don't feel comfortable enough taking the Celtics. So it's not like I'm going to back either team in that. Do I think Boston can go in and win one of the first two games in Milwaukee? I do. I think Milwaukee has now made it past the first stage. They're now to the second step, which they haven't been to, especially with Antetokounmpo there. And I think you're going to start feeling that pressure. Teams react to that pressure differently. And just because you won a first-round series and you swept through a Detroit team that didn't have their best player for most of the 4-game series, I think that might have been too easy for him, and I like Boston game one.
All right, I look at this total of 224, Ralph, and this is going to be, I think, one of those correlated parlays where if you like the Boston side, you're going to like the game under the total of 224. You don't want to see Boston try to get into a track meet with Milwaukee because I think Milwaukee has a huge edge if they play that style of basketball. You look at Milwaukee and what they've been doing scoring-wise. This is a team that's, you know, in their last 5 games, 127, 119, 120, 121. Obviously, they're a team in 116. They played Detroit. You know, that team couldn't stop them. Boston's a better defensive team. But I still think on the home floor, I think they're going to dictate the tempo at home in this first one. I'm going to go over 224. So for me, I guess I'm in a roundabout way saying I'm not buying into Boston to take them as a dog, but yet I'm not buying into Milwaukee to lay the 8 points here. But I think Milwaukee is going to be the team that escapes game one with the win, and if it's to their pace, then I got to look to the over, and that's where I settled in on the 224 over the total for me. And I had these flip-flopped. I'm sorry. This is a Sunday game, Boston and Milwaukee. The Saturday matchup is an intriguing one. The Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors, and I don't have the stat in front of me. Maybe you remember it off the top of your head.
2-14.
Okay, it's 2-14. Toronto, game one.
Last 16 playoff series. Toronto's been a favorite of most of those because they were a 1 or a 2 seed for many years. They're 2-14 straight up in game one of a series, and they have a brand new head coach this year. But what did they do game one against Orlando?
But they came right back, won game two, and never really looked back. You know, after that, they played. Granted, again, this is one of those disparities where you had a team that's a have versus a team that's a have-not. Orlando won some games at the end of the season, but Orlando, let's face it, they weren't a playoff team this year, and Toronto disposed of them rather quickly. Philadelphia, on the other hand, they had some dogfights in a couple of the games with the Nets, and one of the games literally was a fight, and, you know, there was ejections and everything else. And that was the game, I think, that sealed the fate, obviously, for Brooklyn because they had that game won. They led that game throughout. They had the brawl, had the ejections. They still had the lead late. And somehow Philadelphia not only won the game, they were trailing almost the entire second half, but pulled out the cover They were laying 3.5. Yeah. Got the point spread win on Saturday. And for the Nets, that was the season, and they did not show up last night to play in that game.
You know, I was on Cup of Joe with the Prez that morning, and I thought that would happen because if you read the papers, so many players were saying, we were right there. We were close. We had that game. When you're that team that's down 2-1 and you have that game at home that you should have won and you just screwed up late and you're now down 3-1 and you have to travel to the opponent, those are the games that you're going to let up when you're a young team and don't have the veterans to say, that's all right, we'll learn from it, we'll move on. That's the exact situation that happened. So that didn't surprise me. You know, in this one, series price?
Series price in this one is Toronto minus 240 and Philadelphia plus $1.90. I think you're going to see a lot of love for the Philadelphia 76ers because Toronto is a team that, as you said, they're a regular season paper champ, so to speak. They haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs. Do they get it done here? We saw the big run by Philadelphia last year, and we always say it's stepping stones, you know, when you got to pay your dues. Has Toronto paid more dues, or is Philadelphia ready to take the next step?
I like Toronto. I think Toronto handles the series. I think handles them pretty easily. You know, I've said numerous times, I picked Toronto to win it all. Even to beat Golden State, I thought they had a chance. This was before, you know, in our first playoff pod. And I talked about Philadelphia having as much talent as anyone. But I'll tell you what, getting Kawhi and then, you know, Lowry being Lowry and Siakam. But I think Gasol's the big answer here because now you have someone to go and bump against Embiid and Simmons. And when you have Gasol and the multiple guys they can throw and the scoring they have, they've been there, they've done that. And I think Kawhi just adds another different level to the team, that they're playing defense, they're playing offense, going to that Air Canada Center, I think it is when you play. I remember the Cavs going there and struggling. I don't think Philadelphia's young team's going to be able to fare well in that at all. Will I play them game one? No. I mean, it's silly to say that 2-14 first-round record shouldn't mean anything, but I'll tell you what, those players know about it too. But I like them for the series, and you know, I may actually play him game one. We'll see what happens. I don't know if I will or not, but I do like Toronto. I think they're going to come out, and I think they're going to give Houston or Golden State, whoever wins the West, a run for their money.
I'll tell you what I'm going to wait and look for. I agree with you on Toronto for the series. If you really do think that game one jinx is going to stay,
you shouldn't bet the series.
You shouldn't bet the series. Wait and come in and bet two.
And, you know, that's a good point, though. Sorry, Marco. If you think you might like Toronto, but the price is high, make sure you don't let that value go by if they do lose game one. If they do, you know, if they do win it, then it's passed, you know. But if by chance they lose it, make sure you're jumping on the series price at that point. So talking about series, I just got to give you props before we go on one more time. I will also say he talked about Denver, San Antonio, and he also talked about the disrespect that Portland got being a dog in the series. So kudos to you. I just wanted to give you a shout out because we're not going to talk about those teams today. Yep. But you did have that series nailed, and you said that you liked Portland, and they sure did handle it to OKC.
I appreciate the shout out there. I'll tell you another way you might want to attack this first game, because everybody is so aware of that first game record. In this being a playoff game, Ralph, do you think come Saturday, game day, that this will be kind of like the Super Bowl effect, not in that enormity, but the fact that there's going to be people that are going to take Philadelphia on the money line because of that history of that 2-14? Do you think you sit here and wait till game time and see where that money line is hovering at? Because we talk about value. They're not going to be priced money line wise as a 5.5 point favorite, in my opinion. I think it's going to be less. And instead of laying the 5.5 with them, take them on a money line at a value number. It's still going to be, you know, upwards of 230, 240, but really maybe should be higher, and it's going to be value because people are going to want to bet the dog.
Well, listening to the Las Vegas sports line today, If it were round one, I think you might get enough public money doing that. But as these playoffs progress and you have these teams in here, there's so much more public money that stat's going to get washed out. Enough people aren't going to play that angle, I think, to change the money line moving forward in that. As, the NBA playoffs, people bash the NBA and may not be betting regular season, but we've heard a lot of guys talk about it on the radio show. When it gets to the playoffs and you get to this now second round, it really becomes a big cash cow for the casinos, and they are writing some big tickets on both sides. So be it maybe a standalone game on a Saturday if the other series doesn't finish, you're going to have monster action, and I don't think that angle will play any part in the final tally of money's bet.
So do you play this game straight at 5.5? Do you take a side?
Well, if I do, I'm taking Toronto. And it's silly to think that 2-14 angle will ever make me not bet a play, but I'm much more apt to bet it with the new coach this year. Yeah. Yes, they lost that first round, but it's not as if though they have the same pattern, they practice the same ways. I think they were just knew they were playing a not very good team, and they just looked past them, and Orlando played a monster game defensively. So, again, having Gasol and Kawhi on this Toronto team, it's like nothing they've ever had before to go with these young kids. I think it's the perfect combination of youth and experience and playoff experience and hungry veterans, which you a lot of times don't find.
And people that can actually play defense. Yeah. Which you don't find a lot of in the NBA, too. And to me, that's what you need.
Kawhi used to play defense and not play offense, and look what he's turned into.
Right. So for me, I don't care about the jinx for round one, and I'm looking Toronto. The question going to be to me is, am I going to lay the 5.5, or am I going to look and see if I am getting value on the money line, or maybe split the wager a little bit with it? But I do think Toronto escapes here. Philadelphia, yes, they're very good offensively. They have more offensive weapons probably than Toronto, but they're too inconsistent. You also have the health of Embiid. You don't know from day to day. When they tell you he's playing, he doesn't. When they tell you he's not playing, he does. It's just, a mix there. And then, of course, we've seen Philly too often this year. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, this team, they show up and they play like gangbusters like they did last night, or they show up and play like they did in Game 1 against Brooklyn when they lost at home and sitting on the sidelines looking at
They need a veteran, and Butler at guard isn't the veteran they need. I mean, they need to, if they had a big guy to go with Embiid and Simmons that can teach those guys how to play
Butler's not an
basketball.
adult. He's an very immature person.
So it's not – they just don't have that experience. So completely agree.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Ralph, when we come back, it's Best Bet time. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It is Best Bet time, and before we get to Best Bets, I've got a Best Bet for you. We've got a special offer. You can get 25% off any package from Ralph or myself this week. That's any package. That's a daily package. That's a monthly package. That's a full season price. You can get 25% off using coupon code POD25. Hey, you had to put up with Ralph and me for over an hour. You deserve something for that. Use coupon code POD25 and save yourself 25%. Ralph, are you ready for Best Bets? You already gave our listeners a Best Bet in Handicapper's Corner. You gave them a draft pick. I'm not going to repeat it. They got to, if they are just tuning in now, they got to rewind, go back and hear that one.
That means he didn't remember, guys.
No, I do.
Just kidding.
I remember. I actually wrote it down. I was going to play it.
Had a baseball winner last week. We had the special baseball segment. I'm going back to baseball again. I started handicapping baseball now daily.
First pitch, great publication you're doing, buddy.
Yeah, and Who's Hot, Who's Not is every Monday, which goes over the last 10 days record. So, a lot of times you get caught up with teams that started well and you think they're still playing well. And it's surprising when you look at the last 10 days. I do run line, money line, over-unders with the profits, and then do runs scored and hits, and then the run and hits diff. So every Monday you can go to WagerTalk.com and go to the Cal Sports page. Who's Hot, Who's Not. The first pitch is up there daily. And then I'm going to be adding much more football stuff. There's a NFL strength of schedule based on the season win totals up there as well. And there's a college football report coming out next week, which talks about all of last year's rosters, how many freshmen played, how many freshmen started. And you may think, why is that important? But college football teams that play freshmen and underclassmen are 10 steps ahead of those other people that lost all the starters and didn't play those young kids. So you pick out some of those teams and you'll find great value in those. But moving to my best bet for Friday, it's going to be KC with Duffy over the Angels. Duffy's making his first start. He pitched a couple rehab games, was banged up earlier this year, just got called up on the roster. And this is a more of a play against the Angels. The Angels are now 1-7 against lefties. They do not hit lefties well. They are completely struggling hitting against them. Duffy last year, if you look at his ERA of 4.88, well, of that 4.88, 6.35 was at home, 3.94 was on the road. And of his 28 starts, 13 of them last year, he gave up 1 run or less. So it was hit or miss. I think you're going to know pretty quick because 7 times he gave up 6 or more runs. 13 times he gave up 1 run or less. I think this case against the Angels, he's going to be on the better side. And I think we get KC as a dog. KC with Duffy against the Angels.
And you mentioned this will be his first start. He had an injury in that little angle I'll add in there to you. I like pitchers that get that first start after an injury because you know they are going to be mentally focused, Ralph. They have been working their way back to get to the big show, get back on the mound, and then when they have that opportunity, they want to make the most of it. Now, the second start can be a totally different story because you don't, it's kind of like the injured player theory. You let down the second start. So I agree with you. Before I give you guys my best bet for tonight, we didn't, we talk about our buddy Brian Leonard a lot. We do a lot of, obviously videos together in podcast, and, we hang out together, generally, like the three amigos. Ralph, Brian, and myself. And as you know, Brian and myself were married. Ralph's the only single guy. And I want to tell you a little story that happened last weekend. I'm going to call Brian out. I'm going to let everybody know what kind of guy Brian is. We had tickets to go to a concert. Now, it was a concert that Brian wanted to see. Okay, so we let him get the tickets, and then we paid him and everything.
It was sweet at the Golden Nugget.
Sweet at the Golden Nugget. And if you've ever gone anywhere with Brian, let me tell you, he always likes to be the guy that will grab the tickets because Brian has to have the owl, okay? Just pure and simple. You move over. Sorry, I got the tickets. Screw you, I'm sitting on the owl. Well, he didn't get the owl this time because for some reason a single ticket was sold for that owl seat. You never see one. You usually see that in the middle of the pack or whatever. So Brian has seat number 2. His wife Renee has seat 3. I'm sitting seat 4. Ralph's seat 5, way on the end.
I try to get as far away from Brian as I can.
So Renee, she's stuck. She has to take the next immediate seat. But in comes who has the seat holder of seat 1. And it is a young,
not young,
MILF territory. Okay, nice, hot, okay. Las Vegas MILF.
A nice-looking lady, period.
Okay,
Marco,
all right.
Let's not go off track here.
All right. Well, Ralph, he's like nudging me to nudge Renee, to nudge Brian to get his attention and say, switch seats with me so I can sit there. And Brian says no. Finally, he gives up the seat. And why did he give up the seat, Ralph?
Well, because the concert started.
No, you had to buy him beers. You had to pay for him to move the seat.
If you go with Brian, he either will not drink or you'll buy him a drink. So that's the two choices.
Yeah.
So,
but that's how that's the only way you were getting his seat. Yeah. Even his wife said to move, and he wouldn't move.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I would have moved for you, sir. Okay.
Thank you, Marco.
I would have let you sit by the nice-looking single lady at the concert. Also, my wife listens to this podcast, and I would have gave you that seat.
And they're waiting for a best bet for all through that crap.
Well, you know what? I'm going to make it worth it, okay? We're going to go. I don't do a lot of hockey, but obviously I've watched a lot of this last series with our Vegas Golden Knights in San Jose. It was a war, okay? Whoever came out of that series was going to have a tough time moving on. It was a physical series. They beat up on each other. It went 7. And Colorado's sitting around waiting for the winner. Well,
7 with what? two overtime periods, game 6 and 7.
Yeah, no, one overtime in the second one. Two in the game 6 had two
three overtime periods. The last
three
two
overtime
games,
periods in the last 2 games.
So they played 3 games. They played 8 games.
Yeah, they played 8 games in game time. You're correct. I'm going with Colorado for the series. I think San Jose, they may have gotten that monkey off their back, advancing in the playoffs, but I just think it took too much out of them. They were down 3-1, had to battle back. Very controversial ending to Game 7. The Golden Knights had total control of the game. They weren't getting anything on Fleury. Fleury was standing on his head. They had a 3-0 lead. Looked like we're moving on to the next round. And because of the way the West has unfolded with the top seeds getting knocked off, Vegas would have been a favorite, I think, to go on to the Stanley Cup, to repeat as last year's Western Conference champion. Everything looked in place with 10 minutes to go. And then the controversial call, major penalty, 5-minute penalty, in 4 goals in 5 minutes for San Jose. They got the game back, and then miraculously, the Golden Knights tied it with 57 seconds left, sent it to overtime, and it went deep into that first overtime before they got the goal. I just don't see them having that same intensity here. I like Colorado. I think Colorado game 1 is a good wager as well. But I like Colorado for this series. And if San Jose does find a way to get game 1, maybe you want to just play a half a unit here. Obviously, if you win the first game, we take the edge here in the series. But if they go down 0-1, you're going to get an even better price on the dog price. You might want to come in with another half unit on Colorado at a bigger price. But I do like Colorado right now. Across town here in Vegas, I'm seeing $1.20 plus $1.20 Colorado for the series. That is my best bet for you this week. Guys, thanks for tuning in this week. Don't forget, next week, big podcast, Kentucky Derby special. We'll have a guest online with us to talk Kentucky Derby. The best 2 minutes in sports, Ralph. And no, that's not what Lori told you her best 2 minutes is. But that's another story for another podcast. And we're going to head on out. Ralph's just shaking his head at me and saying, "What are you doing, guy?" But hey, at least you didn't use your phone this week for the podcast, so we got everything right. So for Ralph Michaels, for myself, I want to thank our guest tonight, William Bernanke, for joining us. Of course, every week, taking us behind the counter, telling us where all of the action is. Shout out to my partner, Ralph. Really some good detailed work on the NFL draft. This is your sweet spot. I mean, this is the stuff you've done for your whole career back at North Coast, analyzing players. So appreciate you sharing that knowledge. Shout out to Johnny Detroit. He makes sure this podcast is available everywhere. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, listen on Spotify, Google Play, and our iHeartRadio. And last but not least, you, our listeners, thanks for tuning in each and every week. We appreciate it. We love to hear your comments about the show. If you like something, don't like something, you want us to talk about something, let us know. Until next week, I'm Marco D'Angelo. Let's cash some tickets.